I think those all are key points and play into exactly how the networking piece works, but also the interviewing component for quants.
Right.
Because I think the biggest failure, so a big tip here for students, is when you interview, I'm not looking for a genius. And people miss this a lot of times. So they come to the interview and they go through these books or whatever. And like in the interview, you're like trying to show me you're like the smartest person ever.
Right.
And I'll mention something and then you just start throwing out like catchphrases of like tests and whatnot.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of times if you're curious in an interview, like you don't know and you're like, hey, I've never heard of that. Can you expand on that? It might ding you a little bit. Okay, you didn't know some basic topic we're looking for. But at the same time, having that curiosity piece and that excitement.
Yeah.
And the best interviews I've had, so the way I interview is probably different than most. So I hate trading interviews. I think they're the biggest waste of time. They take out these books and make you memorize, probability questions. But when I have an application, I look at the resume and I'll interview you off your resume. So if your resume is like chock full of machine learning and data science material, and that's what we're looking to hire, like I'm going to look at it and I'm going to ask only questions from that. Whereas if you have somebody that comes from like a statistics background or somebody that comes from, I don't know, an econometrics background, for example, I'm going to ask you something very specific to those materials. And I think it's important to have like that base knowledge. So again, as you pointed out, right, do that research, make sure you have the fundamentals down. But at the same time, the best conversations I've had with interviewers is when I'm like deviating, like I'll be interviewing you. And then you mentioned, you've done, I don't know, like neural networks. And I'm like, okay, great. Like, have you ever done LSTM networks? And then they light up and they're super excited. They're like, oh, I actually had this one project at work. And we'll get off tangent just chatting about like technical topics. And I think it comes back to like being human, like having fun in the conversation, being excited, being curious, also being respectful, and also not trying to be like one up the interviewer.
Yeah, exactly. Like the thing is people can tell when you're just trying to make money or just trying to do things for self. Like you will reek of selfishness. It doesn't really happen. If you can conceal it that well, you are a special individual. But at the same time, let's say you do conceal it that well. You're not going to enjoy your job if you don't have that curious aspect. So you get hired, you're not going to enjoy it. All right. You're just going to get the paycheck, and it's going to be a pretty difficult time when nothing excites you in the morning. So yeah, that's definitely something.
And I'd definitely be weary too of trying to be an expert when people are not.
Yeah.
So I think students miss this a lot. They come in and they'll be all excited. They've got like time series listed on their resume. And so when I interview, right, my whole excitement in life is time series. So like I'm excited to have this good conversation. And then as soon as they start trying to show you like, I know this and I know this, and like they start stating things that are incorrect, and they're trying to kind of like force the issue on how smart they are.
Yeah.
A lot of times I'll just crush you. Because it's like my background is so deep and you don't realize like what you learn in school is great and it covers, I don't know, it's like 2%. And then when you're an industry practitioner for like 10 years, for example, you cover like 10%. But it's like you'll never reach that full spectrum because there's so much to learn. Yeah. And I think having that piece like you're talking about, respect and being humble, knowing there's all kinds of stuff you don't know. Like I still see stuff, people will like throw me a paper and say, hey, have you seen this type of model? And I'm like, nope, never seen it. And it applies exactly to my work. So I'm like, we got to look at this. And so having that curiosity piece and being willing to kind of be humble, it's a huge component for the interview and also the networking part.
Yeah, and I think people forget there's a huge cost to rewire an employee's brain.
Oh, yeah.
Like you training people on something that they think is so correct or basic can be the largest hassle. So they really hate when people are so overconfident on concept that they end up being wrong about. So I'm not saying, don't have confidence, but I'm saying, if you're going to say something, don't let the adrenaline take over. Make sure you're saying something you've seen stated, has reputability, like is actually to some extent indisputable by the interviewer. It'll be pretty difficult for you to make it through, in my opinion.
Yeah. And on the confidence piece, this is something I thought was interesting. I interviewed somebody a while back and it was like a team interview. So it's like most interviews are like this now, right? You interview with the first person and then it's like you sit in the room and a second, third, fourth all comes through. they interviewed with a whole list of people and did terrible. Like they missed every single question. They had no background, no personality. Like I'm trying, like as an interviewer, I'm not trying to grill you and figure out why you shouldn't work here. Like I want to figure out why you should work here and trying to find those, I don't know, fun and exciting pieces of you. And they went into a final round with the person that was going to be like the head, the person was going to make this final decision, and they knew that. And they went on and on about how great the interviews went, and they were just so confident. But it was like they completely misjudged the entire situation. And so I think it's better to come off humble and kind of balance, as you're saying, right? You need some confidence. So it's like you're confident, they know what they're doing. But also, they entirely ruined their shot because once the whole discussion was had between everybody, it was obvious that like they were way overconfident on their skills and they didn't have the skills necessary. And then it was kind of like a really big turnoff to see that like you thought you did excellent and you're like an all-star.
Yeah.
And yet you missed every single cue throughout that entire process.
And everyone is obviously guilty of that at some point, right? Especially in your younger years, it's extremely easy. I like to say sophomore students have the highest odds of doing that because you're right off of the comfort from getting through second year, from getting through first year, but you haven't faced too much difficulties. So second year is the perfect spot usually for students to be overconfident in their capabilities.